Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 100, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Amash of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 312, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amash, and a member opposed will each control 7.5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
We're here today for a very simple reason: to defend the Fourth Amendment, to defend the privacy of each and every American. As the Director of National Intelligence has made clear, the government collects the phone records without suspicion of every single American in the United States. My amendment makes a simple but important change. It limits the government's collection of those records, to those records that pertain to a person who is the subject of an investigation pursuant to Section 215. Opponents of this amendment will use the same tactic that every government throughout history has used to justify its violation of rights: fear. They'll tell you that the government must violate the rights of the American people to protect us against those who hate our freedoms. They'll tell you there's no expectation of privacy in documents that are stored with a third party. Tell that to the American people. Tell that to our constituents back home. We're here to answer one question for the people we represent: do we oppose the suspicionless collection of every American's phone records?
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman reserves. Who seeks recognition?
I reserve the balance here.
From Florida, seek recognition.
I rise to claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 7.5 minutes.
I'm very happy to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman, very distinguished chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Rogers.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the American people, certainly some well-intentioned members in this chamber, have legitimate concerns. They should be addressed. We should have time and education on what actually happens in the particular program of which we speak. And I'll pledge to each and one of you today and give you my word that this fall, when we do the Intel authorization bill, we will work to find additional privacy protections with this program that has no emails, no phone calls, no names, and no addresses. 14 federal judges have said, yes, this comports with the Constitution. 800 cases around between the 1979 case have affirmed the underpinnings of the legality of this case. 800. So 14 judges are wrong, and 800 different cases are wrong. The legislators on both intelligence committees, Republicans and Democrats, are all wrong. Why is it that people of both parties came together and looked at this program at a time when our nation is under siege by those individuals who want to bring violence to the shores of the United States? Because those who know it best support the program, because we spend as much time on this to get it right, to make sure the oversight is right. No other program has the legislature, the judicial branch, and the executive branch doing oversight of a program like this. If we had this in the other agencies, we would not have problem. And think about who we are in this body. Have 12 years gone by and our memories faded so badly we forgot what happened on September 11th? This bill turns off a very specific program. It doesn't stop so-called spying and other things that this has been alleged to do, because that's not what's happening. It's not a surveillance bill. It's not monitoring. It doesn't do any of those things. What happened after September 11th that we didn't know on September 10th, and again, passing this amendment takes us back to September 10th. And afterward we said, wow, there is a seam, a gap. Somebody leading up to the September 11th attacks, a terrorist overseas called a terrorist living amongst us in the United States. And we missed it because we didn't have this capability. What if we haven't caught it. But the good news is we don't have to what if. It's not theoretical. 54 times this and the other program stopped and thwarted terrorist attacks both here and in Europe, saving real lives. This isn't a game. This is real. It will have a real consequence. This is hard. Think of the people who came here before us in this great body. Madison, Lincoln, Kennedy served here. And the issues they dealt with, and the politics of big and moving America forward, while upholding the Article I mandate to this House that we must provide for the general defense of the United States. And think of those challenges. Think of those challenges that they met. Are we so small that we can only look at our Facebook likes today in this chamber, or are we going to stand up and find out how many lives we can save? Let us get back to the big politics of protecting America and moving America forward. Soundly reject this amendment. Let's do this right on the Intel Authorization Bill.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Florida reserves.
I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield 60 seconds to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding to me. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this amendment will not stop the proper use of the Patriot Act and FISA authorities to conduct terrorism and intelligence investigations. I'd never block that. All this amendment is intended to do is to curtail the ongoing dragnet collection and storage of the personal records of innocent Americans. It does not defund the NSA, and it would continue to allow them to conduct full-fledged surveillance as long as it relates to an actual investigation. Our joining together on this bipartisan amendment demonstrates our joint commitment to ensuring that our fight against terrorism and espionage follows the rule of law and the clear intent of the statutes passed by this Congress. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote for this amendment.
The gentleman from Michigan's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan is reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I'm very happy to yield 2 1/2 minutes to the gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. BACHMANN.
The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Florida, and I thank the Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a very important issue that we're taking up today, because the number one duty of the federal government is the safety of the American people, of our constituents, and of our own skins, for each one of us who are in this chamber today. As we know all too well, national security is a real and present danger, and something that we have to take quite seriously. We can't deal in false narratives. And a false narrative has emerged that the federal government is taking in the content of Americans' phone calls. It's not true. It's not happening. A false narrative has emerged that the federal government is taking in the content of the American people's emails. It's not true. It's not happening. We need to deal in facts. And the facts are real. And the facts are these. The only people who have benefited from the revelation of classified information by someone who worked for this government, who intentionally and unauthorized declassified some of the most sensitive national security information that we have. The only result is that those who are engaged in Islamic jihad will have been benefited, and those that we seek to protect have not. Consider this. There is more information contained in the phone book that sits at home on your kitchen counter about each one of us than the information that is in the national security database that we're talking about today. Your name, your address is in the phone book. Your name, your address is not in this national security database. No other nation in the world has the advantage that the United States of America has on national security. No other nation. And we, by this amendment today, would agree to handcuff ourselves and our allies by restricting ourselves, Let it not be. Let us not deal in false narratives. Let us deal in facts that will keep the American people safe. When you look at an envelope, when a letter is put in the mail, is there a privacy right as to what's been written on that envelope? No, there isn't. Where there is a privacy right is what's contained inside that envelope. That's a Fourth Amendment right. Is there a Fourth Amendment right to the record that you called someone on a certain day? No, there isn't. That's a record. But there is a Fourth Amendment right to what's in that phone call. Let's deal in reality, not in false narratives. And I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Florida reserves.
I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise in strong support of the Amash Amendment, and I do so as the person who is the principal author of the Patriot Act in 2001, who got that law through quickly after 9/11, and who supported and managed the 2006 reauthorization. Let me make this perfectly clear, that unlike what we've heard from speakers on the other side of this issue, this amendment does not stop the collection of data under Section 215 to people who are subject to an investigation of an authorized terrorist plot. What it does do is prevent the collection of people who are not subject to an investigation. Now, relevance is required in any type of a grand jury subpoena or a criminal collection of data for a criminal trial. This goes far beyond that and what the NSA is doing. The time has come to stop it, and the way we stop it is to approve this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan
I reserve the balance.
reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
The
Madam
gentleman
Chair.
from Florida continues to reserve. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan for his leadership on this important issue. Reports of the NSA surveillance program have broad and far-reaching consequences. Many Americans feel that our fundamental liberties as a country and our constitutional rights is threatened. In addition, it has ruined and hurt our reputation abroad, threatening our trade relationships with allies, threatening American jobs as a result, and putting in danger our cooperative security relationships that we need to fight the war on terror. The responsible thing to do is show some contrition. Let's pass this amendment. Let's make sure that we can have a practical approach that shows that protecting our liberties and securities are consistent and critical for the United States of America. I urge a yes vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan
I reserve the balance of my time.
reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Oh, I continue to reserve.
The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Here's the question. It's a question of balancing privacy versus security. It's a question beyond that. It's a question of who will do the balancing. Right now, the balancing is being done by people we do not know, by people we do not elect, and in large part right now by somebody who has admitted lying to this body in a hearing. That's wrong. We should be doing the balancing. We were elected to do that, and we need to pass this amendment so that we can do the balancing, not folks that are not elected who we do not know.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan
I reserve the balance of my time.
reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I continue to reserve, Madam
Gentleman
Chair.
from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Michigan.
May I inquire as to how much time remains?
Yes, sir. The gentleman from Michigan has 3.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield 30 seconds to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Loughran.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
I want to talk about the much ballyhooed oversight. Every year there is a report to the Judiciary Committee, an annual report on Section 215. This year the report was 8 sentences, less than a full page. To think that the Congress has substantial oversight of this program is simply incorrect. I cannot match Mr. Sensenbrenner's brilliant remarks, but I do agree that when we wrote the Patriot Act, Relevance had a meeting, and I would ask unanimous consent to place in the record a letter to Mr. Sensenbrenner from the Department of Justice that basically says because 300 inquiries were made, the records of every single American became relevant.
And her
That's
unanimous
a joke.
consent request will be considered under general leave. The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the gentleman. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, this is not about how sincere the NSA people are in implementing this technique. It is not about how careful they are. It is whether they have the right to collect the data in the first place on every phone call, on every American, every day. The Patriot Act did not specifically authorize it. Section 215 talks about tangible things that are relevant to an authorized security investigation. In the NSA's interpretation of that, relevant is all data all the time. That is simply wrong. We should support the Amash amendment and vote for it. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield 15 seconds to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 15 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 4, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Those who choose to trade liberty for security will find they have neither. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Warrants need to be particular and specific about the place to be searched and the items to be seized. No judge would ever sign a general search warrant like the British did, allowing the police to search every house on the block, much less seize everybody's phone records. But this is what has happened under Section 15 under the government. Government's gone too far in the name of security that the Fourth Amendment has been bruised. Rein in government invasion, no more dragnet operations, get a specific warrant based on probable cause, or stay out of our lives. And that's the way it is.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Chairperson, this amendment stops the government from misusing Section 215 to engage in the dragnet collection of all of our personal telephone records. Congress did not grant the executive the authority to collect everything it wants so long as it limits any subsequent search of that data. This amendment restores the requirement that records sought are relevant to an authorized foreign intelligence or terrorist investigation. It restores the minimal relevance standard required by Congress but ignored by successive administrations. No administration should be permitted to operate above or beyond the law as they have done in this respect. And I therefore urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of the Amash-Conyers amendment.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 30 seconds.
General warrants, writs of assistance, that's what we're looking at. And the Founding Fathers found that to be anathema. It does, what they're doing does violate the Fourth Amendment. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and we're supposed to rely on a secret agency that deals with a secret court, that deals with a selective secrecy committee. And members of Congress are limited to their access to the actions of that committee, but we're supposed to trust them. Folks, we've got a job to do. I yield back. We vote yes.
The gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
Madam Chair, may I inquire as to how much time remains?
The gentleman from Michigan has 45 seconds remaining, and the gentleman from Florida has 2 minutes remaining.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Gabbard.
The gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Countless men and women from my state of Hawaii and all across the country have worn the uniform and put their lives on the line to protect our freedoms and our liberties. I cannot, in good conscience, vote to take a single dollar from the pockets of hard-working taxpayers from across the country to pay for programs which infringe on the very liberties and freedoms our troops have fought and died for. Ben Franklin said, "They who give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for 15 seconds.
We're here to answer one question for the people we represent. Do we oppose the suspicionless collection of every American's phone records? When you had the chance to stand up for Americans' privacy, did you? Please support the Amash Amendment and oppose the NSA's blanket surveillance of our constituents.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Chairman, I yield 2 minutes for the closing argument to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Cotton.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I rise to strongly urge opposition to the Amash Amendment. This program has stopped dozens of terrorist attacks. That means it saved untold American lives. This amendment is not simple. It does not limit the program. It does not modify it. It does not constrain the program. It ends the program. It blows it up. Some of you have heard the analogy that if you want to have search for a needle in a haystack, you have to have the haystack. This takes a leaf blower and blows away the entire haystack. You will not have this program if this amendment passes. And that does so despite all of the safeguards you've already heard. This program is constitutional under Supreme Court precedent, not recent precedent. Precedent goes back to 1979, just 2 years after I was born, the year that one of the young sponsors of this amendment was born. This program is approved by large bipartisan majorities of this body on the statute, text that they approve, not their secret intent or wishes. It is overseen by Article III judges who have been confirmed by the Senate and are independent of the executive branch. It is reviewed by the intelligence committees, and it is executed primarily by military officers, not generals, but the majors and the colonels who have been fighting and bleeding for this country for 12 years. What is it? Metadata. It sounds kind of scary. It's nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet with 5 columns, called to, called from, date, time, the duration. 5 columns, billions of rows. It's in a lockbox. It can't be searched unless you have specific suspicion of a number being used by a terrorist. Only then do they go into that database and do they run a search for what that number has been calling. Why do you need it? Verizon, AT&T, other companies will not keep this data for the years that's necessary. And secondly, you need it quickly. When I was in Iraq as a platoon leader with the 101st Airborne, if we rolled up a bad guy and we found a cell phone or we found a thumb drive, we would immediately upload that data so intelligence professionals could search it, so they could go roll up another bad guy, because you only have a few hours to stop a terrorist once you catch another terrorist. Folks, we are at war. You may not like that truth. I wish it weren't the truth, but it is the truth. We are at war. Do not take this tool away from our warriors on the front line.
Gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Madam Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan will be postponed.